Oh, all right. Clear my throat right at the beginning. That's how we do this. Is that how we do this? That's not how we do this. How's everybody doing? We are going to get right into it. This may be one of the last Tuesday night live streams that I do moving into the summer. Let me know what you think about this. I will switch up my schedule a little bit. I'm thinking of doing a Sunday afternoon live stream, Sunday evening live stream. I know there's other people that kind of do a Sunday chill live stream. Shout out to McMo. I don't know if there's more going on Sunday, but I'm just trying to work out my schedule. And so moving forward, and you may have already seen this if you're paying close attention to the podcast, we're shifting some things. I'm changing some things. I focus on some of the trends that I see in culture, predominantly through podcasting, and doing that through like what's going on with Joe Rogan. It's interesting. I still really like Joe Rogan. I like his podcast. I like what's going on in Joe Rogan's podcast. Still just a little quiet. Ooh, okay, so thank you for that feedback, Mr. Grimgriz. What I'm doing is I'm gonna make my adjustments. Let's just go with that. Let me know what that sounds like. Because my audio control is so touchy, I'm trying to rely on OBS to do that. Now it's still quiet. All right, I touched it. We'll see what happens. We'll see if it goes wild. But thank you. Grimgriz, how are you doing? Thanks for being here. Let me know how life is, man. I have not been able to catch up with your live stream or your chat, and maybe it has to do with my mic position. Let me see here. What was I going to do? Joe Rogan. What does he say? Joe Rogan is sticking with Jesus, right? I didn't cover this moment. I didn't. A lot of people did. A lot of sort of Christian. Well, I touched on it on a live stream, right? But a lot of people covered this moment with Joe Rogan, where he's like, "I'm sticking with Jesus." Tim Pool covered it. I kind of covered it through Tim Pool. Who did I notice recently? I think it was Doug Wilson touched on it. And, in that moment, I just thought this would be something I would normally cover, but I kind of already have. I just didn't cover that moment. We essentially, let me know if you think I'm crazy, but essentially what I'm saying is podcasting allows us to see the shifts in culture almost before they happen. And so I could see that sort of happening with Joe. Now, I think he said this sort of sarcastically. I think some people made a big deal about it, maybe more than needed to be. But whether or not he's being sarcastic or not, you can see the shift in his thinking. Even recently, let's see, he just had this
using the
Amanda Knox on. And it was early on. Listen to this. Now again, I'm saying what I'm trying to say is I probably won't cover as much Joe Rogan because in a way we've sort of mapped the territory, and I will touch on Joe Rogan's podcast whenever it becomes pertinent for me to do so. Whenever there's an example from Joe that I think is helpful for this conversation that we're having. Let me see. I got to spell things right. At 12:05. Well, let's go to 12:58. We'll speed it up so we don't get dinged too hard by the algo. And it's really interesting because prior to this, what seems to be the problem, pseudo-history, I don't know, help me identify it. So prior to this, as people cover Joe Rogan's spiritual formation, his spiritual quest, his spiritual journey, you would notice that Christianity seems to come up in the conversation. Maybe he's talking to a Christian. I actually saw this, if you go all the way back, probably 2 years ago on this podcast, I noticed that in Joe's conversation with Matt Walsh, he was trying to get Matt to open up about his Christianity. And Matt Walsh kind of didn't want to do that. He wanted to talk more politically, and Joe was very curious about the Christianity. You know, Matt Walsh is a Catholic, I believe. And it was around the time that Joe interviewed Stephen C. Meyer. Now, I think Matt Walsh came before Stephen C. Meyer, so Joe was obviously curious. He was thinking about Christianity. He was getting ready to interview Stephen C. Meyer. And Matt Walsh kind of ho-hummed. Maybe I'll even go back to that video because it's a long time ago, and you can see Joe's curiosity. So again, we've sort of, through the mystical, magical power of podcasting, can kind of predict this surprising rebirth in belief in God that Justin Brierley is also covering, and many others are covering. I think Justin's doing a good job of it. And so when Joe starts saying things like, I'm sticking with Jesus, it actually doesn't shock me. I feel like we've been talking about this for quite some time, and we know that, you know, I do believe that eventually Joe will come into contact with the person of Christ if he hasn't already, and yet the expression of Christianity that many people might see in a person like Joe Rogan will be different. And I think the church needs to be prepared for that. But here's an interesting part of a conversation where it seems like Joe isn't following the natural flow of the conversation. He brings up Christianity himself kind of out of the blue. So what does that mean? As if we look at the barometer, if we look at this as sort of a climate test, a cultural spiritual sort of test, what would it mean that Joe, who maybe was curious about Christianity, is now he was against Christianity, he was skeptical of Christianity, and then he was maybe curious of Christianity, and now he's the one bringing up Christian principles.
Christians aspire to is what you're doing, really.
And like, I don't wish bad stuff upon other people. And
that's a beautiful way to live your life. It really is. I mean, that's what all Christians aspire to, is what you're doing.
Okay, so he brings this up.
Yeah, I guess I'm not a Christian.
Radical forgiveness.
Yeah, you know, and it's funny. I didn't really set out. People like point to that. They're like, forgiveness. You're doing forgiveness, and I was like, is this forgiveness?
She's not a Christian. She didn't bring it up, but Joe is like, what I see in you is what I see in Christians. This thing called radical forgiveness, this unconditional love is essentially what it is. If you wanted to look at sort of a biblical theme, you can trace this from the very beginning. But one of the places that you see it, and I will bring this up in the podcast moving forward, is in the Abrahamic covenant. Because what basically happens is God makes a covenant with Abraham. He takes on both parts of the contract. Abraham splits the animals, and then the two parties who are entering the contract are supposed to go through the blood, but only God goes through the blood. And what God is saying in that moment is, if this contract is broken, then let what has happened to these animals happen to me. And so you have an expression right there of what is unconditional love, meaning I am going to love you and I'm going to forgive you, and it's not really going to be about anything that you have done. I'm going to take it upon myself to do this thing. So I'm actually prepping to cover Isaiah 53, and I'll talk about that here in a second. If you didn't know, this is sort of random and strange, but you might see it pop up more often, is I actually have a youth ministry channel that covers the work that I did in youth ministry. And on that youth ministry channel, you will see, where's my lesson on? I did a lesson on the Abrahamic covenant in a kiddie pool. And I think it's hilarious. But I'm going to point to this illustration right now. So what you have is you have the animals. You can see the stuffy animals. And what happens is the blood, right? The blood of the covenant is right here. And Abraham's here, and God's here. He's the cowboy. He's covered in blood. The blood of the covenant is on God in that moment, the smoking cauldron goes through the blood of the sacrifice, and Abraham never goes through the blood. So the judgment of breaking the covenant will never fall on Abraham. Who will it fall on? It will fall on God himself. And so there's this beautiful picture of what Joe is now speaking about. He's speaking about radical forgiveness and unconditional love. But I find it interesting that he's the one bringing it up, not his guest. So what does that mean? What does that mean about Joe Rogan's quest? And so with that little tidbit, I hope you know that I will still pay attention to Joe. I will still pay attention to Russel Brand. I actually thought Russel Brand said something very interesting recently. I will still pay attention to Jordan Peterson. But I want to point out something as well, and that is something I got a comment. And hopefully it's okay. I'm going to read some of your guys' comments here. And as we move forward, particularly through the summer, I'm just going to do more live streams, and then I'm gonna anticipate clipping those live streams into smaller segments and releasing those smaller segments. Now, when I do that live stream, feel free to give me your feedback, but I'm preparing to do those live streams Sunday afternoon, potentially Saturday afternoon. I don't know exactly when I'll do it, but if you have some feedback, let me know, because, and I got this, shoot, my computer screen is kind of messed up. So I will try to deal with this, even though my computer screen is too far away from me right now. Let me do this. Let me get you guys, I don't know if that's big enough for y'all to see it, but is this Almighty Om? I think that's Om, Elohim. Is that Almighty Om? Because you come into the chat every once in a while. So I believe it is. I'm creating dialogues. So quoting the description of my channel, I'm creating dialogues with Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, Russel Brand, and other powerful voices. And then he says, he or they say, I wonder if even more valuable is to create a dialogue with the people, the audience. And that is something I have tried to do. And I hope you guys see that. I haven't said that, but I do think I'm actually going to change the description of my channel to incorporate this. And essentially that would be the shift is, and I've said this before, I do want to get more people on the podcast. I want to do more interviews. It's just hard. Like, it's hard to schedule people. The people that I've reached out to, I guess maybe they're too high profile, but Warren Gage would be one that I would love to have on the podcast. I would love to have Tim Mackey on the podcast. I have a friend who knows Tim Mackey. Well, I sort of know Sam a little bit. Sam knows Tim Mackey. But I don't know that Sam, I don't think Sam likes me very much. So Sam might not be my in with Tim Mackey. But I have another friend who's close to Tim. I would love to talk to Tim Mackey about the nature of narrative in the Bible. And there's a few other people who I would just love to have on this podcast. If you know somebody who you think I should have on the podcast, that I should invite onto the podcast, maybe what we'll do is and I invited Christian Baxter on, maybe even to help me with the live streams. I'd like to have Christian on the podcast. I was on Christian's podcast a long time ago. But yeah, we need more dialogue. And maybe I'll even be a little bit more active within the TLC and within that sphere. I caught a little bit of Luke Thompson's live stream this morning on my way into work. But yeah, we'll see. More dialogue. So good observation, and I will incorporate that because I do agree it is valuable to create dialogues with the audience, and that is far more transformative to society and culture. I use the argument I have with Harold Bloom. I argue that more important to our history than our genius are those that interpret those great minds for us regular people. And in some ways, that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm a student. I'm a layman. I'm not, but I do try to do sort of street level philosophy and theology. And I do that by staying a student and not presenting myself as some sort of expert in the realm of theology. And so I hope that that's what we're doing. Interpreting other people's conversations for the benefit of future dialogue. And then you go into some stuff that I'm not quite sure about. These are just people that I'm not familiar with, but I thought that that was good feedback. How can we get our kids engaged? Yes. So we were talking about technology in the schools being the sort of root cause of why so many students are checking out of learning. I don't think that's the root cause. I think you simply have the wrong technology. I think stories are a type of technology. Wordcraft and dialogue, these are a type of technology that has been with humanity from the beginning. We've just forgotten how to use them. So the issue is we have generations that are not engaged. How can we get our kids engaged with parents and grandparents and that do not value the education? Yeah, we've sort of outsourced education to the state, and that's been part of the problem. This isn't just religion; it's health, it's education, it's relationship. Yeah, and I think that stories will do this to some degree. There's a passage, I think it's Psalm 107, that talks about how the Word of God is meant to heal. It is meant to heal. It actually came up in our worship service in our Sunday morning. Psalm 107:20. He sent the word to heal them. It's the word. How do we? Faith comes through hearing the word. Yeah. So there's that. I appreciate these comments. I wanted to read some of the other ones. Stories, narratives, mythos. Remember, there are different stories. It's not simply living the story. We must live our stories. We must tell them as we live. Theseus's ship as a story, as our narrative guide and minstrel. Identities are stories other people tell that you live. Myth, narrative are the stories you tell and live. The Bible is poetry when it is that, I guess. Maybe there's another comment. It's probably there. So we also need to pay attention to the other stories, the other myths, the myths that don't lead to life, right? The truth leads to life and freedom. Lies are the things that would lead to death. Afriel, good to see you. All right, so let me catch up on pseudo history and Afriel. Good to see you. You know, Grim, I'm going to call you out. I love that you pop in. You pop in, you tell me my audio is messed up, and then I try to talk with Grim Grizz, and he ghosts me. So I don't know. I don't know what that means. I don't know how to feel about that. I love that he is a member and is supporting this channel. And maybe that's something I can do also over the summer is do more member stuff. But yeah, thank you guys for supporting the channel. In a fatherless society, people will seek the Heavenly Father whether he exists or not. Interesting. Soon we will live in a motherless and fatherless society where the devil, the family dog, the social media become the babysitters. Wow. Where the devil, the family dog, and social media become babysitters. That's worth it. Here's one other thing I was going to ask you guys for some help. Don't guilt trip me. I'm still here. Thank you. Grim, it's good to see you. He's resurrected. I do need some help, maybe, if you guys are catching live streams, because like I said, over the summer, what I will be doing is more live streaming, and I will try to be clipping the live streams into small bite-sized bits for people that maybe don't catch the live stream. Even tonight, this live stream, I'm not sure will go the full length as a normal live stream. We have some thunderstorms coming in, and I've got my in-laws in town, and so, yeah, shout out to in-laws. I will need your help. Here's what I'm asking for. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, comment. Do all the things that help the algorithm, particularly right now where, well, maybe I'm not making as much content. You can always go back to the playlist that I have and check out your favorites. But if you see something in a live stream that would be worthy of a short, like something that would be 30 seconds or less, let me know. Timestamp it in the comment below and say, hey man, go back through your live stream at, whatever, 4 minutes and 32 seconds, think about clipping that for maybe a short, or clip this section for a shorter video. And that would actually really help me out. I think if I'm going to move forward with this podcast in any real fashion, I will need a little bit of support just from the people who've already found the podcast and who see the value in it. So thank you guys for being here. Thank you, Grim, again for being here and never leaving or forsaking me. But yeah, the devil, the family dog, and the social media become the babysitters in a society where there are no fathers, where there are no mothers, and where we have lost contact with our Heavenly Father, I guess, in some way. Fear not, there is hope. Interesting, argue over God, claiming they all know the Heavenly Father. We all have the same Heavenly Father. Yeah, some of us are children who have rejected the Father. Does that make us children? How are we brought back into the family? It's very interesting. Very interesting, because in some ways we are all created, right? We are all children of God in the sense that God created us all. And yet, are we part of the family? Or have we rejected his invitation to dine at his meal, so to speak? It'd be very... that is a conversation that we will have moving forward. And I'll just let you know, since it's on the top of my mind, as I look through something like Isaiah 53, as I listen to people like, and I'm going to say his name wrong, but Tovia Singer, as I hear these voices speak from a Jewish perspective, I'm working on... I'm studying something that I think, at least at the very beginning, has really helped me make sense of things. And I guess what I would say is Isaiah 53, the suffering servant. Of course, Christians read Jesus into that. Of course, we see Jesus there. We understand what Jesus has done. So as we find our way back to Isaiah 53, we go, oh my gosh, there's Jesus. But of course, Tovia Singer, speaking from a Jewish perspective, he would say that the suffering servant is the Jewish people, which I find not to be in the text. The word it's Isaiah 40. If you begin from 41 and work all your way to 53, there is the servant, there's the Redeemer, there's the arm of the Lord, there's the Lord himself, there is the sense of the servant as Jacob and Israel, and then there is the servant as a single person. And you actually get that in 42. Tovia Singer doesn't go all the way back to 42 in his commentary, at least that I've found. Behold my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one, not my chosen people, even in this section, in whom my soul delights. I've put my spirit upon him. It's singular. Third person masculine, singular. And of course, I don't know Hebrew, and so somebody could say, well, you don't know Hebrew, so you don't know what you're talking about, which is so funny. And I'm riffing here, so forgive me. I've been thinking about this video, and I will do a video kind of addressing this in more detail. But it's interesting, at one point, he's got a couple videos on Isaiah 53, and at one point, he's like, the reason people don't get this, the reason people don't understand this is they don't understand Hebrew. And I'm like, that's so funny, because the Muslims tell me the same thing about the Quran. They're like, you don't understand the Quran because you don't understand Arabic. And so here I have a Jew telling me I don't understand the Hebrew Bible because I don't understand Hebrew. I've got the Muslim telling me I don't understand the Quran because I don't understand Arabic. And yet the Word of God, now I would reject the Quran as the Word of God. I don't believe that. But the Bible is not meant to create an ethnocentric religion. It is for everyone, and even someone who doesn't read Hebrew can understand it. And so, yeah, it is. And I appreciate, and to riff off last week's live stream, one of the things I will appreciate about Rabbi Tovia Singer's approach here. Of course, he's not my rabbi, so I don't want to mistitle people or whatever. But he appreciates the poetry of Isaiah. He appreciates the poetry of Isaiah, and I appreciate the poetry of Isaiah. And if we go back to last week's live stream, that's the idea the theology of storytelling is the thing that will reach across ethnocentric divides. It will reach across communities. It will reach across languages. It will reach across generations. How do we get the parents and the grandparents and the kids all together? Stories. We don't need any more technology than that. And the greatest story, it's right here. And I would agree with Tovia Singer. I would agree with anybody who looks at the Bible and says, this is divine revelation, prophetically inspired by the Spirit of God. And it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And so I think we have common ground there. And we also have common ground in that we don't want people to misuse the Bible. And so I'll work on that a little bit. Sorry, I'm neglecting chat here. Lots of things causing checkouts from school. Yes. And I'm sorry for guilt tripping you, Grib. You got to work to keep his attention. True, Afriel. True. He was making dinner, though. And then Almighty Om says, good day. Okay, this is Om, right? Okay, I'm reading your comments. Maybe you have to spell this phonetically. Is that the same? Yeah, that's the same icon, isn't it? Okay. Yeah, we called you. We called your name in the beginning. I argue, read Isaiah 53 as all for another great prophet will come. Israel as people, destiny, and prophet. A call for another great prophet. If you read Isaiah 53 as a metamodern prophetic archetype, where Israel is both subject and symbol. Now, I think there's a nested reality of the servant. I think actually what we have is the servant in chapter 42. What you have is this play, and I don't have it fully mapped out, but you see the righteous servant, and then you see one called a servant who is unrighteous. So do we have a contradiction here? Or do we have a righteous servant who is calling out the unrighteous servant to become righteous and to be transformed? And so I would say you have this sort of, in a way, I don't know if it's a nested reality, but you have the archetype of the servant. And then you have the people who are meant to be the servant of God, who are meant to reflect the true servant of God, and yet they don't. And it's very interesting. Like, what would make a remnant, the remnant of Israel, faithful? This is something Tovia Singer goes into. Again, I didn't necessarily want to do a sort of a deep dive on his videos yet. I want to release that. I want to take my time to release that. But one of the things he says is, this is Israel, this is Jacob. It's not just all Jews, it's the faithful remnant. Now, again, I think he makes a false equivalence. He creates a false equivalence fallacy because the text is not talking about Jews. It's talking about Jacob and Israel. Yahudi is not mentioned. So if the prophet wanted to write Jews into that text, he has a Hebrew word that he could use. He doesn't use it because he's not talking about Judah. He's not talking about the Jews. He's talking about Israel. So I do think that's a false equivalence that Tovia Singer makes. I've heard other people make that same false equivalence to say that the suffering servant is about the Jewish people. The passage is not about the Jewish people. It's about Israel. And I do think the Jewish people have a part to play in God's plan for Israel, but part is not whole. And so you've made a false equivalence to some degree. I'm not really like a true philosopher here. Sorry, you started saying stuff, and it brought me back to this video and just some of the things that I've been thinking about with regards to the suffering servant, and just how kind of how do you jump? How do you make that jump? How do you make that jump that somehow I'm a slave? The goyim, the Gentile nations are sort of a slave, right? That there's redemption all throughout Isaiah. There's the Redeemer is a figure in these passages. So redeemed from what? Well, redeemed from your slavery. What caused you to fall into slavery? Well, your sin. Okay, so if Israel has fallen into slavery because of their sin, how is it that Israel could free me, a Gentile? They are in the same predicament that I'm in. I need a Savior who is not a victim, not a slave to sin. I need a Savior, a Redeemer who is truly righteous. Now, I do think this servant, as an image, the people of God who are not righteous because of their works, but because of their faith. That is why they are the offspring of Abraham. Abraham was reckoned righteous on account of his faith. Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him as righteous. That was a whole diatribe, but that's kind of some of the stuff that I've been triggered about. But if you read Isaiah 53, meta-modern prophetic archetype, the text becomes a living call for a future redeemer who will re-embody the suffering servant pattern in the new. Okay, so here's actually what I'm thinking. I think Jesus is the archetype of all human history. All of history is an echo of the person of Jesus. So and that echo works backward to people like Abraham, right? It is, I want to say transformed, but that gives a wrong idea. It's not like he worked history backwards. It's just that God is sovereign over all history. He knows the plan from beginning to end. And so all of human history contracts on this one moment in the person of Christ. So as we go back into something like Isaiah, you can see that history is leading to that. An archetype and a call. But I do think there is a future. I mean, this is the weird thing about Christians, right? We believe the Messiah has already come and that he's coming again. So we're weird like that. A call to embody it ourselves. I agree. And I think the servant, as the people, as Jacob and Israel, reflect the servant singular, my chosen one, right? I do think the people of Israel, now again, I actually expand that into the nations because of Ezekiel 37. I don't think of Israel as Judah. I don't think of Israel as the Jews because it's just not. It's the Jews and Judah are part of that story. But there's this whole other northern kingdom called Israel that has gone into the nations. And honestly, when you read through these chapters, I asked Yosef about this and Matt C. about this. There does almost seem like an echo of what is God doing in the northern kingdom as he has essentially allowed his people to be absorbed into the nations. You see a foreshadowing of this in the person of Joseph, who has two sons of mixed race, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim becomes synonymous with the northern kingdom. So as God brings back his people, he's bringing the nations. That's who he's calling. And so the goal, like Jacob, his redeemer will be known. I think you're there. Yeah, goalie, Hebrew for my redeemer from Job 19:25, but I know that my redeemer lives. Job, Yosef actually pointed this out. Job almost becomes another foreshadowing of the suffering servant, which would be very interesting to look into. Maybe you're not saved through works, but faith without works isn't truly faith. I agree. Yeah, I think it's transformative. I think the faith of Abraham is transformative. And so it starts to work. You look at this servant, this one in whom my soul delights, the one that who's, it's singular. It's interesting, this third person. What is this? And as you look upon him, and as you have faith in what God is doing, again, there's passages here throughout 42 and 53 where God says, look, I'm doing a new thing. Like, pay attention to this. And I don't have it fully mapped out. And I'm sorry, like I said, I'm not quite ready to do the Isaiah. I'm not quite ready to do the whole thing. But let me see if I can post this back into here. I want to do this. That's not what I want. Not this one. Shoot, cuz. Let me find my notes. That was the wrong notes. Thanks for hanging out, Sherry. I see you. Pseudo history back in the chat. I appreciate you guys being here as I kind of ramble on. And again, I wasn't necessarily planning on doing a long live stream, but anyway, he does say it's there. It's there. I maybe don't have it. My Redeemer. Very interesting stuff. Abraham was a person and a father of the nations. Could not be a person, also be a nation. I do think there's a play on that. Yeah, there's a play on the servant. There's a play on Israel, the nation. There's a play on Jacob. I mean, and there's even the idea, Tovia Singer, it's so funny. And one, I wanted to read more of these. I want to read more of these. We got to that. But on one part, he says, hey, Isaiah's hard. It's poetry, but it's clearly not talking about Jesus. So that part's not hard. We've got that figured out. And then when it comes to the offspring, it's like, oh, God's not going to have kids. What does it say? Children, like, oh, God doesn't, it wouldn't make any sense if this was talking about God, because God doesn't have children like that. It's not like he's going to come down and have a family. Okay, so in that sense, it's not poetry anymore. It's biology. It's like, no, I think Sherry is right. I think that the faith, and again, I think we can't escape it. Israel is called to be a light to the Gentiles. If it's not a light to the Gentiles, it's not Israel. And how is that? Abraham's faith was that light. It was the faith in what God was promising to do, the faith in the promise of God. Again, like Afriel was saying, it doesn't mean that there was no works involved, but his works were living in obedient harmony to the plan of God that was revealed to him. A cult is less, not more. Most sacrifice family and community for the cult. Yeah. It's about a pattern, someone or a people who suffer, is misunderstood, rejected. Now, I do think, again, I think there is reason to say the suffering servant is Israel. I mean, it literally does say this. So again, you have this interplay in Isaiah where there's, and I don't know exactly how to categorize it, but essentially it's faithful servant and then a faithless servant. Both are called my servant because they both serve the purpose of God's sovereign plan. Even the disobedience, Paul writes about this in Romans, even the disobedience of Israel is a part of God's plan. So, but in 42, you have the chosen one, my servant, in whom, so the chosen one, the one, singular. In 43 or 44, in 44, we have my servant Jacob. So it is the one and the many, but it's the many who look like the one. So the faithful remnant are those who look like the faithful servant. They are those who look like him, the Redeemer, the one, right? And so I think there is that pattern that Almighty Om is pointing to. Suffering is misunderstood, rejected. Only later it seems important, even scattered like a bird. It's really interesting that Isaiah doesn't really use the term servant until chapter 41. He uses it 3 times in the first 40 chapters, only 3 times. And in 41 to 53, he uses it 13 times, and then never again throughout Isaiah. So this section, that servant imagery becomes very important in understanding that pattern, I think. And it's just work that I'm doing. I'm just doing more work on that area. Excuse me. We learn most through loss. It's interesting. One of the passages that I honestly don't know what to do as a Christian is the Hebrews one, where it's like he learned obedience through the things that he suffered. I mean, what is that? Is it Hebrews? I always get it wrong. It's like 3:5 or 5:3. Help me, Obi-Wan. Nope. Let's try. 5:8. 5:8. It's 5:8, not 8:5. There it is. Although he was a son, he learned obedience to the things he suffered. We learn most through loss. I think this is beautiful. And again, I think the Abrahamic covenant points to this type of thing, that it's God who's going to do the thing. It's God. And in Isaiah, he keeps saying that. He says, I'm the one who's going to do this. God is the one who's doing this new thing, me alone. And don't take my glory. So that is a warning to Rabbi Tovia Singer. That is a warning to anyone. And I pointed this out. Dennis Prager said something like this, that I was like, dude, that is wild. He said that the burning bush becomes a symbol for the Jewish people. I'm like, bro, you are treading on dangerous territory. You cannot take something that is ascribed to God alone and then take it and use it for your own. Yeah, I mean, again, there is a way that the people of God are transformed to look like God. But I'm like, you're pushing the button there. You're getting very close. And it's like, God is going to do this thing. It's not us. And yet, what does he do? What does he do? He becomes a man. He embodies. The word becomes flesh. The storyteller writes himself into the narrative to help us understand what he is doing. And although he was a son, he learned obedience through the things that he suffered. Just like Sherry, or just like Almighty Owen was pointing out. God goes like, okay, I will even humble myself to the point of losing my own life for the sake of my people. Okay, I got to catch up on chat. You guys are flying. We are made through suffering. The most valuable faith is one that is tested, tempted. Again, Job as an archetype of this. I do think, again, there's not no reason to believe the suffering servant is kind of an archetype of the people of God. I just think you cannot overlook the man who is the suffering servant, who then we all mimic. We all become like that person. Again, it's so funny because idolatry plays within these chapters as well. Don't make an image and worship that thing. And yet God essentially is making us into his image. And I think that's why idolatry is so abhorrent to God, is he is transforming us into his image. It's not for man to transform God into his own image. We are made through suffering. There's a cult 1, 2, 3 family community. Okay, pseudo history. Okay, pseudo history is having his own conversation about cults. The one who suffers is ignored might be the very one who saves. The stone overlooked to be the coroner's stone. Yeah. Most chats are cults. Okay. Let's see. I lost you guys here. Hold on. Yes, we are learning. We are missing the mark. I totally missed something here. Okay. God's name is the name. Is the name Israel God with, okay. Almighty Om, help me with that. In the book of Isaiah, servant is a shifting term. There's a way in Logos that I can help myself color code, and I haven't gotten there yet. I'm doing it all manually right now, but I want to look at the shifts in the Hebrew, particularly in the shifts where they are singular or not. God's name is the name Israel. Sherry, help me understand where you get that. Help me. Jacob is named Israel. Now, I think the name of God is actually still somewhat of a mystery, because there are parts where it's like there are people who are called by my name, but he kind of leaves it hanging. God is a Trinity. No one part is greater than the whole. We are one and three. Okay. Pseudo history. I really appreciate you. You jumped from cults to Trinity. I'm with you. Yes, we learn by missing the mark. Sherry, Israel has the name Isis, Ra, and Elohim in it. Isis, Ra, and Elohim. Humans, creatures in nature. Nice, Grim. The Trinity of creation. Sorry, I'm not catching it. It's just predictable. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Let me know. A man is a story, the word. If God appeared to be a goat, would you follow him? No. Because I need a redeemer who is like me. I need a redeemer who is like me and yet without sin. One who can enter into the proximity of my slavery and yet he himself not be a slave. So again, I'm sorry, Tovia Singer. I'm sorry, anyone else who wants me to believe that the Jewish people are the people I should look to for salvation. I just don't. I can't. I'm looking to my neighbor, even my cousin or my brother, who is also in the same slavery that I'm in. And he says, I can save you. I can rescue you. Look to me. Or if you look to me, I'll point you to the true God. And I go, what? How? How do you rescue me if you are stuck in the same problem that I'm in? Together? Maybe. I mentioned Ezekiel. But we didn't go to Ezekiel. this is going to form a lot of my, it's not going to form a lot. This is going to help us understand Isaiah. The stick of Judah and the stick of Ephraim, the northern tribes and the southern tribes, and the roles that they play, and how God redeems his people and brings about the nations, brings about his people who are the nations. The initiation proves the pattern. Okay, at least 5 meanings in Isaiah alone as far as servant, the Hebrew. Okay. Look to yourself for salvation. I tried. Tried that. Okay. See, I see it as God brought faith to the Gentiles. So Israel, those that wrestle with God, is all. Yeah, there is. It's so funny. And I don't know this right now as I work through this passage in Isaiah. There is a way of understanding the suffering of Israel as being something that draws the Gentiles to a knowledge of God. But there's also a way of seeing that the Gentiles draw faithless Israel back into the family. There's another way of seeing it, depending on how you view the usage of Israel and Jacob. I do think it's poetic. Yosef says this. Matt C says this. And most will agree that it's poetic, and it's repeating for emphasis Jacob and Israel. Even though Jacob and Israel, essentially, if you think of the person, Jacob is renamed Israel, so it would be redundant. But if you think of Jacob as the whole nation and Israel as the northern kingdom, I don't know. I would like to get some feedback on that. Ezekiel 47, was it 47 or 37? Yeah, yeah. But it's so good. It's so good. Where did I go? I don't know. I think it's 37. But I think Ezekiel 37 plays into Isaiah. It plays into a lot of things. I mean, again, in Isaiah, in chapters 41 to 53, look at how many times he says, I'm doing something new. I don't think it's a lot, but it's 2-3 times. He says, I'm doing this new thing. It's something that you don't understand. The nation, Israel, doesn't understand it. The Gentiles don't understand it. And what is that thing that he's doing that they don't understand? I think Paul talks about this. He says, this is the mystery, that the Gentiles are co-heirs. What is this? Ephesians 3, right? The Gentiles are co-heirs. They receive the promise of Abraham. Why? Because it's a gift of faith. It's faith in the promise of God. That's it, man. Like, look, out of the stones, God could bring up children of Abraham. It's not about your lineage. It's about, are you a part of the family of faith in the promise that God has? It's in Numbers, I believe. Paul got this in Romans. God brought the faith to the Gentiles to make the Jews just. Yeah. Sort of that hardening of the heart. Deuteronomy 32:21. They made me jealous by what is no God, and angered me with their worthless idols. I'll make them envious by those who are not a people. I will make them angry by a nation that has no understanding. Deuteronomy 32:21. Yeah, well spotted. Blake understands this well. Read Jerusalem, the imitation of the giant. Okay, that's a great recommendation, Sherry. Thank you for that, Blake. Jerusalem, the imitation of the giant albino. I will. That sounds like something right up my alley. I love that. Seeking God for your own salvation is selfish. Interesting thought there. I might have to wrestle with that. Seek God to know God. Seek God for communion with God. You become aware of your need to be rescued and redeemed. That's Isaiah, right? That is Isaiah. Deuteronomy 32. Thank you, Almighty. I'm going to add that to my part of my reading. And again, this comes off of the theology of storytelling, where we did Martin Shaw, who I know some of you in the chat are familiar with Martin Shaw. Of course, Sherry would be. A story is a wild way of telling the truth, a truth that if you just hit people with it, they would not believe you, right? And so you tell this story, and God is saying in Isaiah, he's saying, look at what I'm doing. Look at what I'm doing. I'm doing a new thing. Anyway, I wanted to get. I appreciated the comments of this video. This was just sort of this was a clip from last week's live stream. Again, that's kind of where I'm going in the future. Probably more live streaming, clipping the live streams, posting those. If you guys see something that you enjoy, give me a comment with a timestamp, and I will clip it for a short, or I'll clip it for a shorter segment of a video. Probably doing live streams Sunday afternoon. I'll try a few other nights. So if you subscribe to the channel, if you haven't, hit the subscribe button, and I think it will glow now that I said that, which is spooky. And then you can hit the notification bell, and then you'll know when I go live. And you can disregard it for the most part. But if you are interested in what days I might be live streaming, I won't touch Friday afternoon. That's kind of Paul Vanderklay territory. It does seem like McMo does a Sunday afternoon live stream, but maybe I can piggyback onto that. And that'll carry us through the summer, and I will build a backlog of either interviews or videos that I'm going to be making. I will cover the suffering servant, and I will try to incorporate some of Tovia Singer's ideas here because I've heard them elsewhere also. What else was I going to say? But that does help me. That really does help if you can comment. It's about divine humanity. Even Judaism knows this. Divine humanity. Yeah. Now there's a transhumanist way of understanding that makes me nervous. Know thyself, then you know the presence of God. Romans 10:19. But I asked, did Israel not understand? First Moses says, I will make you jealous of those who are not a nation. You foolish nation, I will make you angry. Like sibling rivalry, encourage one another. I think that's the key. I really do. I mean, look at my video. Look at my video on Revelation. Actually, I talked about my other channel. My dude, this is so fun. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna link this video because I just think it's so hilarious. This is from years ago. This is my other channel. I think I have live chat, so if you're catching this after the fact, but that's the Abrahamic covenant in a kiddie pool. Give it a like, give it a comment. I might be doing more, as far as youth ministry is concerned, making more videos coming up. I've got one in the tank that I just have not been able to get out. But on this channel, I did some work in the book of Revelation because I was teaching it through 12 Gates, 12 Sons. I believe it's this one. I believe it's the 12 Gates, 12 Sons. It's on the Strange Theology channel also, because I worked this into a sermon, and I think it has a similar title. Hold on.
If you've been thinking about using turmeric for
mute him. Where are the videos? I don't remember which one it is. I think it's the image of the New Jerusalem scene from Joseph. Yeah, it's this one. So here we go. I'll link both. But it's very interesting. Sorry, I'm going back to the sibling rivalry comment of Almighty Om. And I think you're exactly right. And what you see in Revelation, it's so beautiful. It is so beautiful. It's actually so beautiful. You see the 12 gates of the new city, and the Ephraim gate and the Judah gate are facing each other. They're looking at each other. And if you imagine what it was like for Joseph to sit down with his brothers at the dinner table after he had revealed himself. Joseph is just such a beautiful picture of Christ, I think. Of course, I see this as a Christian. I read back and I go, whoa, that's Jesus, sort of, again, foreshadowing Jesus. That Judah, and of course, Jesus was betrayed by a Judas. You don't sit across the table from someone you still have a grudge against, from someone you still have conflict with. And so I do think in the New Jerusalem, what Jesus, what the Spirit of God is painting for us is a beautiful picture of restoration, where Judah sits down opposite the son of Joseph, the brother who he betrayed, and they share a meal together. That, I think, is what, again, that is Ezekiel 37. That is what God is doing. That is the mystery that Paul was talking about. Sibling rivalry, rather than, and again, look at the parable of the prodigal son. Look at the parable of the prodigal son in the context of this passage, and tell me this isn't what's happening. The prodigal son is Israel, and the son who stays home is Judah. That's one way of thinking of it. There's other ways, but yeah. Oh, I haven't watched that one you did about Martin Shaw. Oh, yeah. Well, it was last week's live stream. So I did a full live stream on the theology of storytelling, but you can catch the video on my channel. I think I just linked it, actually. Yeah, I think it's probably up your alley. I feel that when we lost the stories we teach our kids lose the chance to dream and myth for themselves. They said reading is meaning making. Hey, Almighty Om, do you want to come on the podcast? Okay, this was supposed to be a short live stream because my in-laws are in town, and I'm actually, so my guest room, the attic that we have converted into a guest room is also where I have my podcast. So I had to kick them out to do this live stream. I should probably get back, but I have enjoyed this so much talking with you guys. Thank you guys for hanging in there and thinking this with me. Again, going back to the comment about how in the future, what we are going to do is build more on the conversation of each other. It will be. Now, I do still think Joe Rogan, Russel Brand, Jordan Peterson, these are voices that act like barometers in culture. And that's why I think it's interesting that Joe Rogan is now the one bringing up Christianity when it used to be everybody else bringing up Christianity. And so we will still listen to their voices because they are interesting people in and of themselves, but their podcasts act like a microscope for the soul, right? We can sort of zoom in and look at what the soul of humanity is like and test the temperature and figure out where we might be going. And again, that's why it wasn't a surprise to me when Joe said, I'm sticking with Jesus, because we had essentially predicted that, 6 months ago. But we will incorporate more Q&As, more stuff like this. And I've really, really enjoyed it and enjoyed our time together. So thank you all for being here. Again, you can kind of check out what we've been up to on the channel. Of course, you're there now. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. I will hang out in the chat for just a moment as my delay runs out, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Have a beautiful evening. Have a beautiful rest of your week, and I will catch you in the next one.